this video, we're going to explore the lathe modifier that exists in the primitives tool in 3D Coat. It resides here in the voxel workspace, regardless if you're in surface mode or volume mode. In 3D Coat, the lathe tool actually allows you to work both in a radial fashion or a cubic fashion. And before I go into this any further, I want to show how you would do it previously so that we can compare both the process and the result. In other 3D applications, you would create a spline curve or spline profile, and a lathe modifier would rotate that around and create a surface from it. Okay, so we'll do that again without the lathe tool first so that we can see the difference and how much of a benefit this really is. Okay, so let's go to the clay brush, and in the E panel I'll choose a spline, a closed spline here, and go to a orthographic view by clicking on the little cube icon here, and I'll go to a front view. And you probably want to turn your axis handles on so that you can see the origin here. Okay, so let me go ahead and just click on some points here. And let's say I wanted to create something of a Coke bottle type of profile. Okay, and I think that's fine. I'll go ahead and hit escape to finish this. And I can go in and just right click where I need to create some hard points. I'm going to create another point here. And right click to harden this point. So you can just right click and continue cycling through the different spline types. A regular spline, a B-spline, and a hard edge. I'll right click here. Okay. I think we're close enough just for demonstration purposes here. Alright, so if I want to save this spline profile, I can do that and reload it at another time in the future if I want to reuse it. So let's go ahead and click apply or the enter key. So we have our little profile here. I'm going to hit the escape key to drop the spline. And I'll choose the transform tool to align the pivot point. So I'm going to choose move only gizmo because that's really all I want to affect. And under position here you have X, Y, and Z, so I'm going to zero out the X position. So I've got my pivot point right here in the very center. And let's go to a top view. I'm going to hit the 7 key on my number pad, or you could go here as well. It looks like it's lined up fairly well right on the origin, so I don't really have to move this object. So now I'm going to click my little cube icon here, or the 5 key on your number pad to come out of orthographic view. So you can see again I'm right down the center of the grid at the origin, and now I can click on the Axial Tool and it will basically just replicate that object 360 degrees, and you might see something like this, a low value here in the axial symmetry order. You can always increase it till you get enough segments to make it a smooth object. Okay, and depending on the size of the object on the grid, if it's small on the grid, you're going to need to increase the resolution on your layer before you apply it. That way it keeps all the creases or edges and so on. It's not too rough. In this case, I'll give it 1 level of resolution and click apply. I can scale it and so on. Okay. And if I further wanted to deform this, I could use the pose tool. Let's see, go back to an orthographic view, front view. This time I'll choose ring. Make a ring selection. Click on the transform mode handle here to switch between the different transform modes. In this case, maybe want to scale it in. You could scale it along the axis here like this. So that's one way of going about it. The other way is here in the primitives tool. You could choose, let's say, something like a free tube. I'm going to create a new layer, hide the other, come out of orthographic view, and you could give yourself a number of control points. I'll go back to orthographic view here, front view, and choose a freeform lasso to select points. And you could use a cage like this in the pose tool as well. So yeah, there are a number of ways we could approach this, but we'll now look at the lathe modifier. Let's go ahead and refresh list just to start from scratch. And when I click on the lathe button, you'll see a profile option here. So if I click a point here and move it, you can see how this works. It's very interactive. One thing I want to point out is be careful that you do not increase the resolution on the layer that you're on before you actually apply this, or while you're actually creating your spline. And the reason for this is if I were to increase this a number of times, it's going to bog down the performance or the interactivity, so you don't want that. It doesn't really change the appearance at all by increasing the resolution while you're constructing this. Okay, so I'm going to reset the curve, and I'll just delete that layer, create a new one. So again, just leave it at the default, and when you create a point, you'll see it's very interactive, very fast. Alright, so let's create a jet engine here, and if we want it to be hollow, we can do that as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click here along this line to create an anchor point. Extend the initial line there, or initial point, and I'll create another anchor point here. And so now I can just continue to extend this. That looks fine. And you can create more thickness. Okay, skip forward just a bit after tweaking the spline some. Okay, and I can also scale this. Alright, so let's say I wanted a chrome bezel here. I can create a little gap for that. So I create a few points. We'll right click to create a hard point. Right click here to create a hard point as well. Okay, and you can see how that works. And now at this stage, this is where I would want to apply the resolution that I need to keep that nice hard crease there before I commit this. So let's go ahead and scale this back down. And you can edit points on a table and change the different spline point types. And you can save this profile and load it at a later time. So before we commit this to a layer, we first want to make sure that we have enough resolution on the layer to maintain any sharp edges and so on. And now hit apply. Came out okay. So I'll hide that layer, create a new one, and this time we'll look at the cubic method, and it's practically identical except that instead of a cylindrical or radial pattern, it's a rectangular pattern. One other noteworthy thing I want to point out is even though your preview object may not appear to be hollow all the way through, it still will come out hollow if you have the points on the end like this. Okay, so as soon as I hit apply, you can see it indeed is hollow. Okay, so that will conclude this demonstration of the Lathe modifier in 3D Coat. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.